तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही प्राण वीणा के, तुम्ही प्राण वीणा के संगीत मेरे, संगीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही प्राण वीणा के संगीत मेरे, संगीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे। तुम्ही मन के मंदिर में दीपक सलोने, मधुर ज्योति में हंस रहे चारों कोने, तुम्ही मन के मंदिर में दीपक सलोने, मधुर ज्योति में हंस रहे चारों कोने, हर एक सांस आती है, हर एक सांस आती है दीपक संजोने, तुम्ही हो अंधेरे क्षणों के सवेरे, तुम्ही हो अंधेरे क्षणों के सवेरे, तुम्ही प्राण वीणा के संगीत मेरे, संगीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे। व्यथा भार मन प्राण कब तक सहेंगे, नयन आज तुमसे हृदय की कहेंगे, व्यथा भार मन प्राण कब तक सहेंगे, हृदय आज तुमसे हृदय की कहेंगे, सदा रैन दिन, सदा रैन दिन श्री चरण में रहेंगे, बकुल फूल से प्रीत के गीत मेरे, बकुल फूल से प्रीत के गीत मेरे, तुम्ही प्राण वीणा के संगीत मेरे, संगीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे, तुम्ही देवता हो, तुम्ही मीत मेरे।
Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. In this beautiful devotional song, in the melodious voice of Arunima, who was accompanied on the guitar by her brother Aditya, is addressing the divine as both Devata and Meet. Devata, God, a God that is an object of worship, and also Meet, that is a friend. And in the Vedantic tradition, that is quite acceptable and common because each individual is considered potentially divine, a manifestation of the divine, an imperfect manifestation, although, but yet having the possibility of meeting the divine and having a basic affinity with the divine, which makes it possible for the devotee to have all types of relationship with the divine, uh, treating the divine as an object of worship as well as a friend. The way Sri Krishna, the incarnation of the divine in the Gita, had a relationship with his disciple Arjuna, which was both that of a friend and Krishna was, of course, the divine, the object of worship to Arjuna. So both these relationships were simultaneous, and that's possible. Then this devotional song goes on to bring out the all pervasive and all capable, all powerful aspect of the divine, its presence in the sound of the musical instrument, in the music of the singer, and the one who illumines, that is, removes the darkness of ignorance and brings the light of knowledge. And finally, the devotee gets impatient with sorrow and suffering, and says that I must speak to you, I must divulge everything to you. The divine is the ultimate counselor. And of course, the devotee also is getting impatient because of not being able to meet the divine the way the devotee would like to. So finally, that call of distress to the divine, I can't wait anymore. Because eventually, it is not personal effort, but the divine grace, the divine condescending to meet the devotee that gives the devotee a good glimpse of the divine. Now we turn to today's subject, which is on overweight, which is the mother of so many maladies. And unfortunately, overweight is becoming a very common thing. And in the West, around half the adults are overweight. So it started appearing quite normal. In India, particularly the affluent sections, we are not far behind and moving in the same direction. Not only has overweight become very common, it has become very common also among children. And that is even more serious because the sooner it starts, the earlier in life, the damage that leads to lifestyle diseases later is likely to manifest. And that is why there is a trend towards the lifestyle diseases manifesting at an earlier age. People in their 30s and 40s are quite often getting diabetes and high blood pressure and even heart disease. And obesity itself, although and basically a problem of energy imbalance, that is the energy intake being more than the expenditure, is in many ways linked to other aspects of lifestyle other than diet and exercise. And that also we shall see how. So with that little introduction, let me turn to the slides. Let me start with on a humorous note. As you can see here, we have two literary giants, George Bernard Shaw on the right and G.K. Chesterton on the left. And you can see the contrast. George Bernard Shaw is very slim, whereas G.K. Chesterton, perhaps by the standards of those days, is on the heavier side, overweight. So here is a humorous dialogue between the two. Chesterton telling Shaw that I can see that there has been famine in the land, famine in England, and then Shaw saying, and I can see the cause of it. That is, yes, Chesterton's telling that looking at you, one would feel that there is a famine in England, and Shaw replying, and I can see who the cause of the famine is. And then they continue, Shaw telling Chesterton, if I were as fat as you, I would hang myself. And Chesterton replying, if I were to hang myself, I would use you for the rope. So the basic cause of energy imbalance of overweight is energy imbalance. That is the energy intake exceeding the expenditure. Intake in the form of food and expenditure in the form of uh, physical activity. Now let's turn to the causes of overweight one by one. Diet, so long as the intake exceeds the expenditure, no matter in what form, whether it is in the form of carbohydrate, protein, or fat, it would lead to overweight. That is basic. It's not that one has to have a particular type of food to grow fat. Any type of food, so long as the intake exceeds the expenditure, can lead to overweight. For example, cows can put on weight on grass, and grass doesn't contain any fat, and yet they can put on weight if fed too much grass. But having said that, there are certain finer points which make it more likely to put on weight if one consumes a certain type of foods. Foods which are high in fat make it very easy to overeat and therefore can promote gain in weight. And why it becomes easy to overeat when one takes high fat food is because, firstly, fat is a concentrated source of energy. So it adds relatively less to the weight of the food, but more energy. It gives us 9 calories per gram in contrast with carbohydrate and protein, which give 4 calories each. So weight on a weight for weight basis, fat gives double as much energy as carbohydrate or protein. Secondly, fat containing foods can be very palatable and therefore tempting, and one is likely to overeat. So high fat foods do make it easier for a person to overeat and thereby put on weight. Sugar again does the same. It makes it easy to overeat because, on one hand, it makes hardly any difference to the weight and volume of the food, and yet adds 4 calories for every gram of sugar that is added. And on top of that, it makes it more palatable, makes the food more palatable. So that's again a double disaster. The food becomes more calorie dense if it is sweetened with sugar, and then also becomes more palatable. Dietary fiber has effects just the opposite of those of fat and sugar. High fiber foods make it difficult to overeat. On a high fiber diet, it becomes difficult to overeat because high fiber foods like coarse grains, fruits and vegetables are uh, difficult to eat. They need chewing, so they take longer to eat. And it has been seen that we stop eating after we have been eating for about 20 minutes. So irrespective of how much energy the food will give us, if we have been eating for 20 minutes and particularly working hard on the food by chewing it, we feel after 20 minutes that I have eaten enough. And therefore, if the food is more difficult to eat, one eats it slowly, uh, one will reach those 20 minutes after having consumed much less than while eating a fat or a sugar containing food, a meal, food, the food which is high in fat or sugar. So fiber makes it difficult to overeat. Further, fiber itself soaks water when it enters, and therefore it swells up, and therefore it makes the stomach full, gives a feeling of fullness in the stomach. And it also uh, moves the food slowly in the intestine, stomach and intestine, and therefore the stomach remains full longer on a high fiber food. So through all these mechanisms, fiber makes it difficult to overeat, and high fiber foods are the whole grains, that is cereals and pulses, which are unrefined, from which the seed coat has not been removed, and fruits and vegetables. So whole grains and fruits and vegetables, these are the major sources of dietary fiber, and these are the foods that make it difficult to overeat. Dean Ornish, the renowned cardiologist, here's what he says: an Asian way of eating and living, which includes the Indian way of eating and living, may help prevent and even reverse the progression of coronary heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. All these are interrelated, and obesity, in a way, is the mother of all these diseases. And therefore, he says that what one should do is, as the Asians in general do, or at least as Asians in general have as a part of their traditional diet, more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, soya products, and fish in the diet. And apart from what we eat, the way we eat, the atmosphere in which we eat also matters. So he says, eat at home rather than outside, more with your family and friends rather than all alone or surrounded by strangers whom one is not really talking to. They happen to be there in the restaurant, but one is not really talking to them and or feeling that sense of intimacy with them. So the atmosphere also does matter. Now, the causes of overweight, apart from overeating, which becomes easier when we eat the wrong type of foods, exercise, uh, less of exercise, inadequate exercise is the another cause of overweight. Now, how much exercise is really necessary? We shall see a little later when we come to the prevention and treatment of obesity. But essentially, a brisk walk, brisk walk for 30 minutes or its equivalent is the minimum exercise that we should have every day. And which exercise? Again, walking is a good exercise, but there are other types of exercise also available. And yogic postures are better than any of these in many respects. But any exercise is better than no exercise at all. Then sleep, inadequate sleep can also promote overweight, at least through one mechanism, and that is by increasing hunger. There may be other mechanisms by which sleep does that. So a sleep deficit also makes it more likely to put on weight. Then there are several psychological factors which can be the causes of overweight. Uh, Food is often treated as a sensory pleasure, and therefore, if the food tastes good, the person may overeat, eat out of greed, and eat more than is necessary, thereby putting on weight. Food also acts as a social adhesive. It has social purposes. It is not just a fuel for the body. When we sit and eat together, we feel closer to the other person, and therefore hospitality is an important part even in several business organizations. A visitor is offered at least a cup of tea, and that is helpful. And then family and friends also tend to meet frequently over a meal. So food is a social adhesive. It promotes relationships, makes relationships better and healthier, and therefore that can also lead to overweight if one indulges in it too much. Then food as a pastime. A person is traveling in a train, has not much to do, and the person may just buy some peanuts, peel the peanuts and have them one by one. Now that becomes a pastime. Then sedentary life is seductively soothing. Uh, One reason why a person is physically inactive is because to do nothing, particularly to do uh, nothing which, unless it is necessary, and structured exercise doesn't look like a necessity, and therefore the person finds it very comfortable not to be physically active, at least not incorporate exercise deliberately into the daily routine. Then mental stress can lead to hormonal changes, which lead to obesity. Mental stress, chronic stress, can increase the steroid levels in the blood, these natural steroids which are secreted by the adrenal cortex, and that in turn can lead to overweight. Then, very often, a person eats to overcome depression. And depression can have both types of effects. In very severe depression, the person may not feel like eating and may starve himself. But in milder varieties of depression, very often the person overcomes depression by just eating repeatedly throughout the day. Not much else to do, so might as well eat. Don't feel like doing anything, don't feel good. So at least get this little pleasure, this little sensory pleasure, eat something. So food is used also to overcome depression. And this is a beautiful quote uh, which talks about both food and exercise. Food is the most abused anxiety drug. When a person is having anxiety or depression, he may start eating, and this is something which the person is using as a drug to beat anxiety, and it is the most abused. That is much more commonly used than any anti-anxiety drug or antidepressant. So food is the most abused anxiety drug, and exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant. Apart from other things, exercise also makes us feel good. It can take away depression, but it is not used that way. Food is used far more commonly as an antidepressant, as an anti-anxiety uh, treatment than exercise. Exercise would be much better if used as an antidepressant. Exercise releases endorphins from the brain, which make us feel good, which take away depression. And therefore, a person can, in fact, who takes regular exercise can get addicted to the exercise. With the way a person gets addicted to morphine, because endorphins have some similarity to morphine, but then they do not create the type of harmful addiction which morphine does. The addiction to exercise by releasing endorphins in the brain is of the desirable variety. If the person feels that he's missing something, if the person has not taken exercise for the day, then the person is more likely to take this exercise. That's a positive side effect of this addiction. So one can see that overweight is essentially a lifestyle disease. Eating too much of food of the wrong type, inadequate physical activity, inadequate sleep, and mental stress, and to some extent alcohol, these all contribute to overweight, and these are all lifestyle factors. So in a way, it is not due to a single cause, it is essentially a lifestyle disease, multiple causes, and most of these factors which contribute to overweight are lifestyle factors. How about the genes and the hormones? Two scapegoats which an overweight person tends to blame. It's all in my genes. I've inherited it from my parents. And hormones, there must be something wrong with my hormones. Maybe I'm not making enough of thyroxine, enough of thyroid hormone, or maybe I'm producing too much of steroids. Now, if a person is not producing enough of thyroxine, then it's better to get it checked up and start taking the thyroxine. But then it should be taken only after it has been confirmed that the person is actually uh, having thyroid deficiency. It should not be taken just to reduce weight. And genes, yes, they can contribute, but then the lifestyle can reduce or increase, delay or accelerate the manifestation. Because the type of genes that give overweight, obesity, or other lifestyle diseases like diabetes, they only create a tendency for that disorder. It's not that one gene gone wrong and one is sure to be overweight. There are multiple genes that contribute and create only a tendency to overweight. And this tendency can be overcome by by having a healthy lifestyle, if not completely, at least substantially, and the manifestation can be delayed. So it may be in the genes, but then if it runs in a family, it's not always because of genes, because the parents try to have the type of food that they like and which promotes overweight. If the parents are overweight, they are also perhaps not taking enough exercise and getting the wrong type of foods. So they buy the wrong type of foods when they go shopping, store plenty of palatable foods like sweets and chocolates, etc., at home, and eat themselves, and the child watches that. And other factors in lifestyle, they're sedentary, the child also watches that, they're sitting in front of the TV, etc., and not taking really physical exercise. So the child picks up the behavior from the parents. So it's partly genes, partly behavior, which can also be transmitted to the children. And a crude joke about this is that fat masters tend to have fat dogs. And certainly there's no genetics involved there. The dog also gets uh, influenced by the behavior of the master. If its master is having too much food, eating the wrong type of food, and thinking that it will make the dog also happy, offering too much of more palatable food to the dog can also put on weight. But then here, the influence is being passed on from the master or the mistress to the dog. Uh, there are certainly no genetics involved there. But just as the dog can be influenced without genetics being involved, the children can also be influenced without the genes being involved. And in addition, if the genes are also there, then it becomes a double disaster. So if the parents have a genetic tendency and also the type of behavior that promotes overweight, both these together become a double whammy for the uh, child. So genetics only loads the gun, but it is the lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So one can't just blame the genes. And another humorous quote, the problem is that obesity runs in your family. No, the problem is that no one runs in your family. Now we come to some of the recently discovered causes of overweight and the type of microorganisms that we have in the gut. And we have a large number of them. In fact, the number of microorganisms that we host as human beings far exceeds the number of human cells. So we are all more germs than human. And the type of germs that we have can influence the body weight. This is a relatively new subject. Not much is known about it, but it's looking more and more likely that there's a close relationship between the type of germs that we have, particularly in the gastrointestinal tract, and the various diseases, including obesity. Directly also, this can contribute to diseases like diabetes, but then indirectly also through the germs. Now, how do the germs promote overweight and other lifestyle diseases? Some of the effects for which there's some evidence is that they increase energy harvest from food, which means that from the same type of food that we eat, we can extract a little more energy with help from the microorganisms in the gut. So they help us extract more energy by promoting glucose transport, by converting certain indigestible types of food into digestible food, that is digesting the indigestible food and making the energy available to us. So they increase the amount of energy that may be extracted or harvested from the food that we have eaten. They can also have an influence on food preferences and may lead to the type of preferences that promote overweight. Then the dietary composition also uh, influences the microbiome, and therefore the type of diet that we eat that influences the microorganisms, and the microorganisms in turn influence uh, how much we extract from it and the type of food preferences that we may have. These gut microorganisms also of the wrong variety also tend to promote subclinical inflammation. The relationship is two-way. That is, on one hand, the abnormal type of germs in the gastrointestinal tract promote overweight, and overweight, on the other hand, promotes the development of the wrong type of microorganism. So it's a two-way relationship, it seems. So there is an intimate relationship. Uh, we don't know enough to really be able to manipulate it with great confidence to reduce the body weight. But all the same, this lends more and more support to the ancient wisdom that uh, that our health depends a lot upon the type of gut that we have, the type of gastrointestinal tract that we have. Digestion is a good way of judging the type of diseases a person is likely to have. It's a good mirror to our health in general. The gastrointestinal tract or the digestive system mirrors our health in general. So that is ancient wisdom, and we are finding more and more support, particularly because of the role that the microorganisms in the gut can play in keeping us healthy as well as giving us a wide variety of diseases. And therefore, if we have any sort of a suspicion that it is the abnormal microorganisms in the gut which may be responsible for any type of illness, including overweight, then we try to correct it. It would be much better if we were to correct it in the natural way by eating the right type of diet, etc. But then that we are not always able to do, and also other factors like environmental pollution, etc., may also contribute to an abnormal gut microbiome. And therefore, this is a relatively harmless way of trying to manipulate the bacteria so that the right type of germs grow and provide a competition for the food available in the gastrointestinal tract to the unhealthy bacteria. So we increase the number of the health promoting bacteria, uh, and these bacteria will then compete with the unhealthy ones which are there in the gut for the available food, and thereby reduce the population of the unhealthy ones, and the population of the healthy germs will increase. So for this, two types of things are currently being used. One are the probiotics. Now these are a concentrated supply of the type of germs that are desirable to have in the gut. The traditional way of getting these bacteria has been through curd or yogurt. But yes, sometimes the person may not have this type of a natural probiotic, or the person may be told not to have it because in Ayurveda, one of the things that uh, it's considered curd would do is to block the channels. So buttermilk is okay, but curd for a large number of people with a certain type of prakriti and in many seasons is not desirable, at least not in any substantial quantity. And therefore, one of the ways to increase the healthy bacteria is to take for a few days at a time, every 3 months or 6 months, these germs from outside, which are available packed in capsules. So those are the probiotics. And then the prebiotics, that is the foods which would promote the growth of these healthy bacteria by providing the nourishment to these bacteria, to these healthy bacteria. And this is the other approach. So in a way, you can say that the combination of probiotics and prebiotics has to some extent been a traditional combination, like a paratha and dahi. That is, paratha is a thick, well cooked, fried, sometimes with a stuffing chapati. So that is a good prebiotic. And along with that, if we take curd as the probiotic, it's not only a very palatable combination, but provides the probiotic and prebiotic together. When we think of the microorganisms, we generally think of bacteria. But the gastrointestinal tract not only has bacteria, it also has fungi, it has parasites, and it has viruses. And these could also be playing a role in health. And one of the viruses that has attracted a lot of attention during the last few years is the adenovirus 36. And Here is a summary of some of the effects that it probably has. One is it increases the glucose uptake by the muscles, etc., and improves the glucose transport across the gut. And that's how it may increase the amount of energy that we can get from the same amount of food. Then it reduces the amount or the efficacy of leptin. Now, what is leptin? Leptin is a substance produced by the fat cells. And this is a sort of, and it reduces appetite. So leptin uh, is a sort of a natural check on body weight, because if the weight is higher due to more fat cells, the person will secrete more leptin, because it's the fat cells that manufacture leptin. And then leptin would reduce the food intake. So the person who is producing more leptin, because the person has more fat cells, by eating less will be able to lose some weight. But then this adenovirus 36 suppresses either the formation of leptin or its action, and thereby promotes weight gain. It may reduce the amount of norepinephrine secreted. This is norepinephrine comes from the adrenal medulla. It is one of those hormones secreted in acute stress. Acute stress doesn't just mean that the person is going through an emergency. A sprint can also be stressful in that sense. It also releases adrenaline. So that adrenaline rush comes during the sprint, and one can have an adrenaline rush also during a passionate kiss. So kissing can be as stressful as a painful blow. One enjoys one and not the other, but so far as the body is concerned, the body responds to both with release of adrenaline or noradrenaline. So, and by and this is something which increases the energy expenditure, adrenaline and noradrenaline. So by suppressing it, again, it would reduce the energy expenditure and perhaps increase the food intake. Then, adenovirus 36 also seems to promote chronic subclinical inflammation. And this is now considered to be one of the major contributors to several lifestyle diseases like heart disease and diabetes. There is a mild inflammation which does not appear like inflammation the way we normally think of it, but all the same, it is this type of inflammation, particularly in the arterial wall, which gives these diseases. So adenovirus 36 through multiple mechanisms could promote overweight and other lifestyle diseases. Now, how do we know that a person is actually overweight? Of course, one can look at the person and say, and that is generally not very wrong, but then a more objective way of doing it is to calculate the body mass index, or the BMI. BMI is equal to the weight in kilograms divided by the height in meters squared. So for example, if a person weighs 60 kilos and the person's height is 165 centimeters, which comes to 1.65 meters, then the BMI would be equal to 60 divided by the square of 1.65, which comes to 60 divided by 2.72, which gives us 22. Now, a BMI between 19 and 25 is considered normal. Less than 19 is underweight, 25 to 30 is overweight, and more than 30 is obese. So there's a distinction between overweight, which is a milder variety, and obesity, which is a more severe form of overweight. Now, sometimes, you would read that for Indians, the upper limit of normal is not a BMI of 25, but of 23. Now, this is not really so much a racial difference as a difference because of the level of physical activity. The West on the whole is becoming more and more conscious of physical activity and probably has more structured physical activity than we have here. And the result is that their muscle mass is more. Now, if the muscle mass is more, that is contributing to the weight, but that is healthy weight. It is not a weight because of the presence of fat tissue. Whereas in Indians in general, the muscle mass is less, relatively less. And therefore, the BMI of 23 and above itself translates into more fat than is desirable and increases the risk for lifestyle diseases related to overweight. So it's basically dependent upon the correlation between the BMI and the risk for lifestyle diseases such as diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease. So in Indians, the risk seems to go up with the levels of 23 and above. Now, the solution is not to try and achieve a BMI of 23 uh, and not let it go to 25. A good solution is to be physically more active so that the muscle mass in the body increases. And that is not to sort of to copy the West or to compete with the West. That is because exercise in general is good. And a higher muscle mass is also something healthy. It improves the utilization of glucose in the body. And apart from that, exercise has many other positive effects. So, better muscle mass makes us stronger, it makes us look better, it makes us feel better, and it reduces the risk for disease in by itself, a higher muscle mass. And therefore, one should work in such a way that even a BMI would be of 25 would be acceptable. And this we can do at an individual level. An individual can take exercise and have a degree of muscle mass, which makes it quite acceptable for this person to have a BMI of 25. The person would not be considered overweight. So for Indians, the BMI is, as a sort of the population, statistically speaking, is sometimes considered to be 23 instead of 25, because Indians on an average have less muscle mass than the Western populations. Now, what are the consequences of being underweight? Why BMI of below 19 is not desirable? Because underweight impairs immunity. And from that can follow not only infectious diseases, but also a wide variety of other diseases, including cancer. Now, what are the consequences of obesity? A few have been listed here, but the list is growing. Hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease, gallbladder stones, cancer, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, because the person has to carry additional weight, and back pain also for the same reason, carrying this additional weight. It's like, if a person is 10 kilos overweight, his back and knees and hips, they are all carrying as if an additional weight of a suitcase of 10 kilos all the time. Doctors very often have blood tests uh, in which they detect markers in the blood which give an early diagnosis. Markers like blood sugar, blood cholesterol levels, triglyceride levels, and C-reactive protein levels, and so on. Now, these are markers which are present in milligram and microgram and nanogram quantities. They are useful, but all the same, why forget that marker which appears quite early before one has any of these diseases? And that is a marker that is staring at us in kilogram quantities. You don't need a blood test for it. And therefore, it's better to be conscious of the risk for these diseases when a person is overweight before a blood test becomes necessary. Childhood obesity uh, is something which deserves a separate mention because of a variety of reasons. Firstly, it has physical consequences, as in the adult obesity, and these would appear at an earlier, younger age, which means the disease is likely to become more severe at a earlier age, and on the whole, it may reduce life expectancy. In fact, it has been remarked by somebody that the next generation is going to be the first generation, at least in the West, because now 50% of the population is overweight, that the next generation is going to be the first generation which will have a shorter life expectancy than the generation of their parents. So the parents have a higher life expectancy than what is expected in the children of today. And that is primarily because the children are putting on weight very early in life. And in India also, it has been seen that in affluent populations, uh, the prevalence of childhood obesity is at least 25%. About 1/4 of the children are overweight. And then childhood, it has an additional consequence, and that is psychological. Because the obesity is still not considered cosmetically very desirable. And since the overweight children are still in the minority, the other children can make fun of them, and the child can also be himself or herself conscious of being overweight, because a desire to look good is quite normal and natural at that age. And also, wants to conform, one wants to be like others, not very different from others. So, since most of the others are not overweight, and overweight is not considered good looking, and the person wants to look good, it can lead to various psychological issues, behavioral problems in children. Now, when it comes to childhood obesity, which is the worst combination? The worst combination is underage at birth and overweight at age 5. Why this is the worst combination is because underweight at birth means that the child was probably undernourished in the mother's womb. And therefore, the child's metabolism got geared to managing with less. It got uh, adapted to scarcity of availability of food, because the metabolic adaptations are possible, and one can be quite apparently healthy on a little less than one needs. And that is what happened to the child. And this is called, developing thrift. And over generations, it can lead even to a thrifty genotype. That is, this can become a genetic trait to be able to manage on less. Now, this type of a person is more amenable to the uh, adverse effects of overeating and underexercising. So, the person who got accustomed to having less food available in the mother's womb is more likely to put on weight when offered more food later in life after being born. And therefore, this person is more likely to put on weight quickly and become quite overweight and even obese by age 5. So the worst combination is, so person who is not adapted to that type of uh, diet, sufficient diet or a little more than sufficient diet, this person is is the highest risk of getting lifestyle diseases like high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes later in life, and quite early in life. Now, how do we prevent and treat overweight? There are many new approaches, but whatever is good is not new. Whatever is new is not good. This is one of those areas. And we'll see what those new approaches are and why they are not good. But whatever is good is not new. It essentially is eat less, exercise more. That is, try and once again establish a good energy balance. Because obesity is essentially a problem of energy imbalance, intake being more than the expenditure. So reduce the intake, increase the expenditure. Both these together will restore the balance, and the person is likely to lose weight. This reminds me of a joke. Once a postgraduate student submitted a thesis. The thesis was sent to the examiner, and the evaluation by the examiner came back somewhat like this: the thesis is good and original, but I'm rejecting it because the part that is good is not original, and the part that is original is not good. Now, continuing with the treatment and the prevention of obesity, prevention is better, easier, and cheaper than cure in this area also. If a person has become overweight, then what should be the target weight? It doesn't always have to be the ideal weight. Try and achieve an BMI between 19 and 23. That is not necessarily what we have to aim at. The aim can be less than that. That is, one may still have a BMI of 26 or 27. That may be acceptable for a certain person because of the inherent constitution of the person, genetic tendency, or whatever you may like to call it, or in Ayurvedic terms, the prakriti of the person. For example, a person with a kapha dominance in the Prakriti is likely to be a little overweight and also will find it very difficult to lose weight. And if the person loses weight, it's also very easy for this person to put on weight once more. So for this person, the target cannot be the same as for a person with a dominance of Vata Prakriti, in which it's very difficult to put on weight. So the target weight doesn't necessarily have to be the ideal in terms of certain objective criteria. Even if it is within the normal range, it can be on the higher side of normal rather than the lower side, 25 rather than 20. So that is what the target, how the target should be determined. It should be based on the constitution of the person. And that's quite okay, because losing in 5 or 10 kilos of weight, even if one does not reach the so-called ideal, will still give considerable health benefits. Then, of course, the two important things that remain are diet and exercise. That is, eat less, exercise more, and we shall see a little more about them. When it comes to diet, again, the same three factors are important: fats, sugar, and fiber. That is, minimize, reduce high-fat foods, reduce the high sugar foods, because as we saw, these can be a double disaster. Adding energy to the food in a rather imperceptible way, and on the other hand, making the food more palatable. Increase the type of foods which have more fiber, and that is whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. This will help the person lose weight because the person will take longer to eat, will feel more satisfied earlier, will feel full longer. But apart from that, if the person is on the whole eating less than what the person is accustomed to, then the high fiber foods will also prevent the person from feeling hungry. So the person will not feel hungry in spite of consuming less if the person increases the high fiber foods. So in short, the way to approach the obesity or overweight through dietary treatment would be to reduce by 10%, 20%, or whatever is convenient, all the foods that the person takes. So firstly, reduce the total intake by reducing just about everything that the person eats. Then try and pay a little more attention to the high fat foods and high sugar foods, reduce them more drastically. And then this will bring down the total amount of food that the person eats, and therefore the person may feel hungry. So then one can have a much larger quantity of uh, high fiber foods, particularly fruits and vegetables, which have very little energy. Fruits and vegetables provide hardly any energy, unless, of course, the vegetable has been made with a lot of fat. But if it is a boiled vegetable, or if it is raw vegetables and fruits, uncooked fruits and vegetables, then they will increase the fiber content, but not the caloric content much, and will make the person feel full. And that can be important because the person is otherwise eating less than what the person is accustomed to, and therefore may feel hungry. But by eating these high fiber foods, particularly fruits and vegetables, the person will not feel hungry anymore. A few other helpful things are that the person can maintain a food diary. Write down everything that you eat during the day. Because if the person is asked to recall what the person had, very often the person's recall is rather inadequate. The person's recall is less than what the person has actually eaten, because many of the things are completely forgotten. So the person is not really trying to cheat and say that the person has eaten very little, but the person actually forgets many other small, small things that the person has eaten during the day, apart from the major meals. So if in a food diary, one makes it a point to write down everything that the person has throughout the day, then this will give the person a feedback, a self-assessment, and the person will be able to see how much I have eaten during the day. And this person can also try and acquire some degree of some knowledge about the caloric content of different types of foods and try and see how much does it add up to. Then the person can keep a weight record. Say every 3 months or so, the person can take the body weight or during the active phase of treatment, the person can even take it once a week, but certainly not more frequently than that, because one doesn't expect a daily change, a significant change from day to day. So one has to allow a little time for the weight to change. Then not only the person who is trying to reduce weight, but the whole family can try and change their dietary pattern to some extent, because the type of food that this overweight person is having is a healthy diet. And why not use this as an opportunity for the whole family having a healthier diet? Now, the right place to begin the healthy changes, that is, healthy changes in the diet to eat more healthy, is not the kitchen, but the market. When the person goes to buy food, buy things which are healthy, they buy the foods that are more desirable, avoid the foods which will be unhealthy. So, in short, the most important thing is that the total quantity of food, that is, the energy intake of the food, should come down. And the usual recommendation, depending upon the uh, weight and for the person and the degree of physical activity of the person, is usually 1200 to 1500 calories for losing weight. Now, one of the things which people insist on asking is which are the foods not to have. And some of the foods which are commonly prohibited are rice, banana, and butter or ghee. But the correct answer is the foods to exclude are none of these, which means that one can have all these as a part of a balanced diet. So essentially, the person does not have to give up anything. It is the total quantity and the emphasis that changes. For example, rice by itself is not bad. It is white rice, which is normally consumed also in large quantities, that is bad. That is what makes the person put on weight, not rice by itself. So a small quantity of rice, particularly if it is brown rice, will not do any harm. The same way, banana, yes, so long as one keeps in mind that it provides 150 calories and takes that into account while seeing how much the person has eaten in a whole day, banana by itself will not make the person put on weight. Butter or ghee, yes, this person, like any other person, also needs some saturated fat. And therefore, butter and ghee are also not prohibited. But then one has to keep in mind that each gram of butter will provide 8 calories, each gram of ghee will provide 9 calories. So long as one takes that into account, one doesn't have to exclude any food, because the food by itself neither promotes weight gain nor weight loss. So there's nothing like fattening foods or slimming foods. What matters in the long run, in the ultimate analysis, is the total energy intake. How about crash diets? Why not go on a prolonged fast or eat very little for a week or two and then get done with it, and then one can forget about it? That doesn't work. Firstly, the crash diet may not be always easy. It may not be healthy. For certain types of prakriti, it is undesirable. And apart from that, its effect does not last, because after that strict period of strict dieting is over, the person has a rebound effect. The person actually starts eating more than the person should to make up as if for all the deprivation. And how about fad diets? Particularly, some of the fads these days are high protein diets and uh, ketone producing diet and so on. Now, these fad diets in general are all bad diets. So, have a healthy diet, a balanced diet, which we have talked about in great detail in the YES.02 course. But a healthy diet essentially is a predominantly vegetarian diet, if not exclusively so. Consists of a mixture of cereals and pulses, both taken unrefined to the extent as much as possible, and 4 or 5 helpings of fruits and vegetables a day, a balanced, judicious selection of fats in moderation, spices in moderation, milk and milk products in moderation. That is what a properly balanced diet is. And that is the traditional Indian pattern. That is what we saw Dean Ornish saying, that the which is a healthy diet. all fat diets are bad diets. Now, does the distribution of intake between different meals matter? Yes, it does. The heaviest meal of the day should be lunch, and the lightest should be dinner. Unfortunately, in many families today, because of various social reasons, it's just the opposite. Lunch is very light because only a little bit is either taken from home, it gets cold there, and so on. By the time it reaches the office, it's only a small quantity, or one doesn't take anything to the office, and one just consumes a small quantity of whatever happens to be available. Uh, but actually, the heaviest meal of the day should be lunch, and the lightest should be dinner. Very often, dinner ends up being the heaviest meal. Not only the heaviest, but also the dinner is much later than it should be, because that is the time when the family can sit together and enjoy the meal. And that's how it becomes heavy. One can enjoy the meal, but which try to have it as early as possible. And even a light meal can be an occasion for enjoying the meal. So, and why the dinner is should be the lightest? One of the explanations is that after lunch we still remain active, whereas after dinner we sleep very soon. So a meal that has been taken at dinner, because it is not being utilized for activity immediately after the meal or soon after the meal, uh, this meal is more likely to be converted into fat because there is no physical activity. And once converted into fat, it's likely to stay there rather than get reconverted into energy. This is one of the explanations, but explanations apart, this is time tested wisdom that the heaviest meal of the day should be lunch and the lightest should be dinner, and it does help in maintaining body weight. Does the number of meals in a day matter? Now, this can be controversial because, in terms of Ayurveda, it is said that only 2 meals in a day are enough. That certainly will help in maintaining weight because there's a limit to the quantity that one will have at each meal, and therefore the 2 meals together will not really make it very easy for the person to overeat. Just 2 meals, difficult to overeat because after all, each meal there is a limit to which the person can eat. After that, the person will feel full. But then there is also a school of thought that small and frequent meals may be better because then it is more likely to be used for getting energy. A big heavy meal is more likely to spare quite a bit for being converted into fat. So this is something controversial, but one can maybe find some sort of a golden meal. But the most important thing is that one can adopt the dictum one should eat only when one is actually hungry. That is a golden rule, uh, followed more in its breach than its practice, because we have got accustomed to a certain pattern. It is time to eat and we eat. We don't worry whether we are hungry or not. Now, to be hungry at the right time, so if we want to combine the two, that is eating at a particular time and also eating only when hungry, the solution is, the remedy is what? The remedy is don't eat too much at any meal. And again, Ayurveda has a good formula that gives us, imagine as if the stomach has been divided into 4 parts. Fill one part with water, 2 parts with food, and leave 1/4 empty, which means do not go on eating to a point where you feel that I just can't eat anymore. Before you reach that state, just stop eating, because one will feel full. Feeling full is quite different from I can't eat anymore. So eat only up to the point when you feel full, and you will feel full without eating too much if one eats the right type of a diet. So if the diet has high fiber, it takes the time and effort to chew, and one eats it slowly. One will be full after about 20 minutes. One may be able to eat more, but one should not. The person is full after about 20 minutes, the person just stops eating. So, and because of the type of food he has eaten, he has not eaten too much, he has not consumed too many calories in those 20 minutes. So the key is to eat less and slowly at every meal. Then when it is time to eat again, in terms of our modern day routine, we eat by the time rather than when we are hungry. When the time to eat the next meal comes, one will also be hungry because the preparation was there at the previous meal when one did not eat too much and ate the right type of foods. Does the variety of foods in a meal matter? This again, is something where we require common sense and prudence. Because on one hand, unless we have a variety of foods, we may not get all the nutrients. So in general, variety is desirable. Uh, no single food can meet all our requirements. And therefore, if you have judiciously chosen variety, and the judiciously chosen part is important. Uh, so if it has a judiciously chosen variety of foods, one is likely to get all types of nutrients. But then one can go to another extreme, have so much variety that itself becomes a reason for overeating. Because say if one has uh, three types of dessert available, then one would say, well, at least let me have a little bit of each. So that little bit of each sums up to much more than it would have if there was only one type of dessert available. And that applies to some extent also to other things like chapati and puri, both are available. Chapati, puri, and rice, all three are available. Chapati, puri, rice, and pulao, four things are available. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and a little bit of this, and it adds up to a lot. Instead of just one vegetable, three types of vegetable, and three types of dessert. Now, that is the type of variety which is not judicious. That is the type of variety which can promote overeating because one feels like taking at least a little bit of each. So, variety does matter. Judicious variety is good, but too much variety, which is not properly thought about, that type of variety can encourage overeating. Does the sequence in which foods are eaten at a meal matter? Yes, that also matters. And the traditional wisdom, the traditional pattern of eating, is also supported by Ayurveda, is quite different from the way we normally eat these days. Dessert comes not at the end, but at the beginning of the meal. So let's see what that traditional pattern is. Start the meal with either water or sweet or salad or a combination of these. Now, each of these has a rationale. Water provides no calories, but it will make the stomach full to some extent. Therefore, one is less likely to overeat once the stomach has been made full. Sweet also makes us full quickly because of psychological reasons, as well as the glucose from the sweet may be released into the blood quite rapidly. And when the glucose levels go up, we are no longer hungry. So by reducing hunger, by making us feel more full, if we start with a sweet, we are less likely to eat too much of whatever we eat after that. Salad again makes sense because uh, it is uncooked fruits and vegetables, and that hardly has any calories. So all three have a rationale behind them, and end with bitter or pungent or astringent. Now, these are not the type of foods that one will have too much of. And further, these are the type of foods which also create an antibacterial environment in the mouth, which means that even if one does not wash the mouth immediately after eating, these type of foods will take care of the germs which might otherwise thrive on the food left in the mouth, stuck in between the teeth, and so on. So end with bitter or pungent or astringent, not with the dessert. Dessert, you see, is a particularly dangerous thing because it is consumed when one no longer really needs food. What's called kritrim ichha, that is artificial desire. A person has eaten all the uh, bread and rice and vegetable and dal and the legumes and everything. And the person says, now I am full. I can't eat anymore. One more chapati? No. A little more rice? No. But then you tell the person, will you have ice cream? Yes, that I can have. So that is in addition to what the person should have had. He has already taken enough to feel full, and then the sweet becomes additional. And therefore, if it is taken at the beginning of the meal, then less likely that the person will have it as an additional thing. The sweet itself will also contribute substantially to reducing the hunger, the person feeling full. and therefore the person is less likely to eat more of other things after the sweet. However, having said that, if the person is quite conscious of it right from the beginning while deciding how much to eat, if the person has eaten less deliberately with the idea of keeping some space for the sweet, one can have it also later on. But then one has to be conscious that the person does not eat the rest of the meal to the point when the person is full. Stop well short of that because the sweet is coming. And that also sometimes the guests are told, you have to reserve some space for the sweet, it's about to come. So one has to use logic and common sense rather than just follow a rule. If it is sweet at the end, it will make me put on weight. It's not that the sweet at the end which makes us put on weight. It is the sweet at the end, which is in addition to the usual food, the amount of food that one should have eaten, which makes the person fat. What is leptin? We talked about it a short while back. It's a hormonal substance, circulates in the blood. It's produced by the fat cells in the body. More the fat cells, more the leptin is produced. And what leptin does is to reduce food intake, and therefore it helps in maintaining body weight. Now, those who are overweight might have leptin resistance. It's not that they can't produce leptin or their fat cells are not producing leptin. More often than not, it is because their body has become resistant to leptin. Body means that part of the brain which regulates food intake. Now, can a child adapt to a low calorie, low fat, low cholesterol diet? We saw that in the mother's womb, the child can adapt to a deficient supply, to a little scarcity of food. Uh, that can also happen later on in life after the during childhood, and the if the child who adapts to that will always remain more sensitive to eating just a little more fat or a little more energy, and therefore it's important not to be very strict with the child. Let the child have as much as the child wants. And here one can even make an exception in case of eggs, which would one egg would provide 250 milligrams of cholesterol every day, apart from 6 grams of protein, and apart from 6 grams of protein and all the other nutrients, because the egg has a whole supply of vitamins and minerals for the growing chick. And therefore, it's a rich supply of all the major nutrients along with 6 grams of protein. And even if the child is getting enough protein from a combination of cereals and pulses, another 6 grams will do no harm. And then 250 milligrams of cholesterol, which on an otherwise vegetarian diet, the child is unlikely to get from anywhere else. Now, this child will then adapt to it and will develop a type of metabolism where a little more cholesterol in the diet, a little more fat in the diet, because the egg will also provide 6 grams of fat apart from 6 grams of protein. So a little more fat or a little more cholesterol will not really throw the child's metabolism out of gear. The child is less likely to put on weight and develop lifestyle diseases if the child has adapted to a good, healthy, balanced diet in which there was a reasonable amount of fat as well as cholesterol also, which can easily come from one egg a day. So the child can adapt, and therefore do not be too strict with the child with respect to these criteria. Because we got sometimes, you develop this feeling the diet must be low in calories, it must be low in fat, must be low in cholesterol, otherwise we'll put on weight, we'll get a heart disease and so on and so forth. But then childhood is the time when the child can adapt and develop a type of metabolism where the child will be able to withstand this type of shocks, this type of deviations. So emphasize only the total intake in children. Total intake should be such that the child can maintain weight. Now, again, when it comes to maintaining weight, one can go to both extremes. The body can adapt to a little less than it needs. The body can also adapt a little more than it needs, and still the body weight will be maintained. So somewhere between the two. Because if the person takes the minimum that is necessary to maintain weight, then the person becomes very sensitive to taking more food anytime later. If the person takes a little more than the person should take, then there's always a risk of in putting on weight. And putting on weight in childhood is more risky because that increases the number of fat cells in the body. And once the fat cells have increased in number, after that, even if the child loses weight, the fat cells empty out, but the cells don't die. The number of fat cells still remains the same. And therefore, there's a tendency for these cells to fill up again at the least opportunity. So a little deviation in the diet, and then these fat cells are already there, waiting for grabbing some fat, and the person puts on weight again. So a moderate amount of food, just the right quantity, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and physical activity to be able to utilize the food that the child is eating. That is the best. So physical activity is not only to utilize food, of course, it has many other positive effects, but to eat less and to be sedentary, which is becoming quite a common pattern among children for various reasons, uh, is not the most healthy type of pattern which the children should have. Now, turning a little more in detail to exercise, the contribution of exercise, the quantitative contribution of exercise to maintaining body weight is small, but it is significant. Every bit counts. And also, exercise itself will increase the need for food through stimulating the metabolism of the body. And it has many other benefits apart from helping us maintain weight. Why the contribution is small is because there's only a small bit of expenditure that we can play with using exercise. In case of diet, the range available is much wider because we can bring down the caloric intake considerably. But we can't increase the energy expenditure too much by exercise because certain amount of exercise, a certain amount of energy will be spent anyway just for the process of staying alive. Even if a person is lying down all the time, the person is using quite a bit of energy, and only a little bit more is because of the routine physical activity and a little bit more because of moderate exercise. So we do not have too much to play with, but at the same exercise is important, although its quantitative contribution may be small. Now, the two types of exercise one can have: finding an excuse for exercise, like say walking to work, using the staircase instead of the lift, etc. And second type of exercise, setting time aside in the daily routine for exercise. And this is important because this will give a more conscious, a more balanced exercise, an exercise which gives a top to toe workout. And simplest is a brisk walk for 30 minutes a day or its equivalent. And if the person is sedentary and has decided to take exercise, start with less, start slowly and build up. And if a person has a chronic disease like high blood pressure or heart disease, then or diabetes, then seek medical advice before embarking on the exercise. And lying down peacefully consumes roughly in an adult 1 calorie per minute. And in the next, that if lying down per minute units, we can just say how many times, what is the multiple, or how many times this is utilized when one indulges in various types of activity. And you find cooking 2.5 times as compared to lying down, desk work only just about 1.5 times. Driving a car, double the energy, although in a traffic jam, it might go up further. And if the driving is unruly on the road, that can take it still further up. Walking at 5 kilometers per hour, 3.5 times as compared to just lying down. Walking at 6 kilometers per hour, 4 times. Walking 8 kilometers per hour, 9 times compared to lying down, which is not much less than running at per hour, which increases the energy intake, so energy expenditure 10 times as compared to just lying down peacefully. Running at 15 kilometers per hour increases it to 15 times. Going upstairs is more energy consuming. Walking upstairs at 1.5 kilometers per hour consumes double as much energy as just lying down. 3 kilometers per hour, 7 times. So walking the stairs up the stairs fast can be a good exercise. Coming downstairs, even at 3 kilometers per hour, just 2.5 times as compared to lying down. Yoga asanas, as you can see, not very energy intensive, only about 1.5 times as much as desk work. This gives you another idea of how much food we can burn off by taking exercise. 12 walnut halves, 12 almonds, or 20 peanuts give 150 calories. One banana or 1.5 chapati also give 1.5 calories. And to burn these 150 calories off, one needs a 25 minutes of a brisk walk. Should an underweight person take exercise? Yes, the person should, because exercise is not only for maintaining weight, exercise is also important for fitness. Further, an underweight person might find encouragement in the fact that exercise itself stimulates appetite. The person will be able to eat more, and exercise promotes increase in muscle mass, and the person wants to put on muscle rather than fat. That will also add to the body weight. And therefore, this underweight person will put on some weight by adding muscle mass. Now, how about yoga and body weight? We saw that it does not consume too much energy, and therefore it's not very good from that point of view. It doesn't help us consume or spend too much energy. But it is better than many strenuous exercises when it comes to cardiorespiratory fitness, fitness of the heart and the lungs, and general well being. And yoga is not just physical activity, yoga also includes changes in the diet. And not only that, yoga makes physical activity and healthy eating a joy rather than a burden to be carried. So, what is Shreyas, that is what is truly good, also becomes Preyas, that is pleasant. And that happens because yoga is based on a certain spiritual philosophy, which reduces our attachment to sensory pleasures and which makes maintaining health a sacred duty, because it is only through a healthy body and mind that we can fulfill the spiritual purpose of life. And yoga also addresses the psychological causes of overweight, anxiety, depression, etc., because it replaces stress with something positive, that is love, peace, joy, and fulfillment. So the overall contribution of yoga can be enormous to maintaining body weight and doing it happily, doing it joyfully, rather than doing it just to uh, look good or to escape disease and death. Underweight people, people who have low thyroxine, whose thyroid is not producing enough thyroxine, tend to be overweight. And those whose thyroid is producing too much thyroxine tend to be underweight. But then that doesn't mean that thyroxine is for thinning, because not all overweight people have deficient thyroid function. If there's a suspicion, it's important to get the test done and then only start thyroxine under medical advice. So thyroxine is not for thinning. It's a hormone with multiple functions. And when thyroxine is not taken, not needed, if it is taken, one may lose a little weight, but then the person will also get symptoms like palpitation and other side effects of excessive thyroxine in the body, exactly the way a hyperthyroid person has, that the person who goes to the doctor because his thyroid is making too much thyroxine. So thyroxine is treatment for underfunctioning of the thyroid, that is hypothyroidism. It is not the treatment for obesity. Are there any drugs for losing weight? Yes, there are quite a few, and this reference that I have given underneath from Mayo Clinic lists about half a dozen drugs which have been approved in the US for use for losing weight. But then this in this reference, you'll also find that drugs may be used in addition to, not instead of, a healthy diet and exercise. They are not a substitute for a healthy diet and adequate exercise. And these drugs are recommended only if in severe obesity, if the BMI is more than 30, or if it is more than 27 and is accompanied by diseases such as hypertension and diabetes, which could benefit from weight loss. All these drugs have side effects, some of them serious ones. And therefore, the bottom line, this reference says, is that the drugs for losing weight aren't an easy answer to weight loss. They're not an easy way out, but they may help in making the lifestyle changes which are necessary. Because a person who is grossly overweight may find it difficult even to be physically active. Surgical treatment is even worse. It is available, and there are many types of surgical treatment available, removing a whole lot of fat which is covering the intestines in the abdomen, the omentum, taking some fat from there, or reducing the capacity of the stomach so that the stomach will be able to hold less food, or reducing the length of the small intestine so that the person will absorb less food. All these types of surgery are available. They do make the person lose weight very quickly, but then their side effects, the side effects of this type of surgery are worse than those of drugs. And if one stops the drug, the side effects may be reversed, they generally are. But in surgery is an irreversible procedure. One cannot reverse the side effects of surgery. And therefore, surgery is advisable only in morbid obesity, which means a person weighing, say, 200 kilos or something. Now, that type of person, yes, surgery may be advisable, but normally it is not really advisable. So, all that is new is not good in this area, as we saw. And what is good is not new. Now, why does a person who has put on weight once have a lifelong tendency to put on weight? That, as we saw, is because the number of fat cells does not change, and the fat cells which have emptied out can fill up again. They have a tendency to fill up again. Now, obesity or overweight goes to the root of a variety of lifestyle diseases. And when we go to the root of our troubles, that in itself has a marvelous healing power, as it were. Here are two books which have quite a bit of what we talked today. Much of it comes from Back to Health Through Yoga, Rupa Books publication, published first in 2008, still going strong, and Eating Wisely and Well, again from the same publisher, published in 2012 and still going strong. Here's an inside view of the Meditation Hall of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. You're always welcome here. And for questions and comments, you may drop an email to yes@yesspirituality.com. Gratitude to all the resources on the internet, especially Google and Wikipedia, which have made it so easy to add substance to a presentation, including this one, and spice it up too. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making these sessions possible. And thank you all for being there. Long session, longer than it should be. Ideally, it says the attention span is about 20 minutes. This has gone on for 90 minutes, 4 times the attention span. But then you can go over it again and again. If you go to the recording, you can have a look again whenever you feel like, in small installments.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning, Ramita.
So actually my son is 10 years old and he's like 137 centimeters in height and 42 kg weight, and he looks overweight actually. I just want to know he has a tendency to eat one or more, two sometimes extra chapatis or paratha. Sometimes he asks when he doesn't like the vegetable, and sometimes when he likes, then also he asks like, I'm hungry. Matlab, he starts crying if I don't give it when he goes beyond normal. So how should I control that? Secondly, his eating habits is somewhat unusual. He eats the sabji separately and later on enjoys the roti alone. So that's what I'm concerned. How should I improve upon his habits so that he can control his weight, basically?
Well, on a few things. One is what type of food you make available. Secondly, the vegetables, apart from being given as vegetables, can be also mixed with dal. You can mash them up and add them to the dal, or any other, even a other vegetable which has a gravy with it. In that, one can have quite a bit of vegetables. Then the sequence which you said, starting with vegetables and then going to that is a somewhat natural sequence, but one tends to keep the most palatable thing for the end. But what matters is, again, the total quantity eaten. One of the positive things in children is that you don't have to focus too much on losing weight. You have to focus more on maintaining weight, because in any case, the child is growing. And therefore, the growing child will put on weight. It is supposed to. So long as it puts on weight without appearing more fat, that is okay. So as he grows from 10 to 15, this will be the period of rapid growth. And to some extent, that itself will facilitate reaching a normal appearance and a normal weight. Because as he gains height, if he does not increase the intake much beyond the present, that itself will make him lose weight. Another thing to emphasize is that let him eat as well as he can, but then let him take more physical exercise. So if the diet part is not very effective, try and give him more physical activity, and if it can be of the interesting variety. So anything can be made interesting, including yogic practices, as we have been seeing in some of the classes. So some interesting physical activity, and more than what it is now.
Right. Thank you so much, doctor.
There's one question. Is curd prebiotic or probiotic?
Curd is a well, I myself get confused. That's why I written there in that slide that one is a food, other is. But what difference does it make? Curd has germs, and it has healthy germs. So put them in the tummy if it suits you otherwise. And if you put them along with a food which provides nourishment to these germs, the combination is better.
Okay, the next question is it harmful to have paratha with vegetable for dinner?
No, no food by itself is harmful. The important thing is the quantity, the total quantity. Say one paratha will have 200 to 300 calories, and anything up to 400 calories also will be considered a light meal. So paratha with vegetable can fit into that. One paratha with a little vegetable can fit into that. Or one paratha with some dal can fit into that framework of a light dinner. Just one paratha and vegetable or dal or both, no dessert. That will we have that will fit sort of the requirements of a light meal.
Yes.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive lecture, sir. These days there is a trend towards the vegetarian food, which looks like a non-vegetarian meat food. I mean, how about your? I know I understand that this must be with lot of processing, but how? I mean, what are your views about it?
Well, the food that I can think of, which is vegetarian but tastes like meat, is soya. It has been given the shape of small sized things which look like minced meat, and large chunks which look like muscle meat. And to some extent, the taste is also similar because soya is a high protein food like meat, and therefore the taste is also quite similar. Uh, well, so long as uh, so long as it's a vegetarian food, it is an acceptable food, uh, and will not have the same type of harmful effects which non-vegetarian food has. But but the other part of it is, if one can gradually work on oneself and overcome that craving from the yogic point of view, that would be better. But otherwise, from the purely a physical or scientific point of view, the effects depend more on whether it's a plant food or an animal food, not so much on how it tastes. If it tastes like animal food, fine.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so there are no more questions in the chat box, so maybe we can close the session with a moment of silence. So thank you, everyone.